Welcome back, friends. Welcome to day 4 of our 7-day extreme grocery budget meals for my large family of 6. Be sure to check out the first video in this series for the full shopping list, the cost breakdown, and the full week's meal plan. Today's recipes will include a delicious stewed chicken with seasoned rice and beans for dinner, a super hearty and flavorful chicken, rice, and potato soup for lunch. But let's start out with breakfast, which was day 2 of the cornmeal porridge. That recipe for the porridge is included in the day 2 video of this series, so be sure to check that one out. So here I'm just showing the amount of cornmeal we still have left after making the porridge on the second day. I still had about a cup of cornmeal left, and with this porridge it made 6 servings, and I usually use a cup to scoop out the porridge. That is a very hearty and comforting meal. It's great for fall. So now let's move into lunch. So for lunch here I have 4 pieces of chicken, some thighs, some drumsticks. Again, check out my first video and it'll explain the prep for these meals. So I'm just putting this in about 6 cups of water, and I'm just gonna boil it because I'm gonna need that stock for the soup. So here you'll see my stock, nice and flavorful and dark. My chicken is cooked down so soft that it is just gonna fall off the bone, and I'm gonna show you how I debone this chicken. And I'm just gonna shred it with my hands, no need to use any utensils. And of course, I let everything cool before I put my hands in here. So here I'm just plating out the chicken, removing it from the pan, and I'm just gonna break it apart and shred it down because this chicken is gonna be used for this meal and another meal that's coming up on tomorrow's video. For this meal, I'm only gonna need about half a cup of chicken. This actually yielded about 2.5 cups of chicken, but I'm gonna use a very small amount. My pan here is bigger than it actually looks, and I'm just pulling away all the skin, all the fat, any veins or anything I see after the chicken is cooked, and just separating that out so that I have a good shredded chicken. And I'm just gonna store the remaining chicken that I'm not gonna use today in the refrigerator. This is a great way to plan ahead to shred up your chicken in case you need it throughout the week. Just store it in the fridge or the freezer depending on how long it's gonna take for you to use it. So here I have my pot for my soup, and I'm adding bacon fat. If you do not store your bacon fat, what are you doing? It is so much more flavorful than oil, but if you do not have bacon fat, of course, use oil, use butter, use whatever you have. So here I'm just adding my onions. Again, as always, my measurements will be down below in the description box. And I had an extra carrot in the refrigerator that I needed to use up. And remember, fruit meals is all about adding everything that you have available. So to my pot, I of course have the potatoes, some garlic salt, and I'm adding some chicken stock here, the chicken stock bouillon, a little seasoning salt. Remember, we're gonna make a soup out of this, and there's gonna be a lot of liquid, so we wanna extract a lot of flavor. So of course, I'm gonna brown these vegetables with all that seasoning just to get some browning on that pan. And of course, I'm putting my favorite, that complete seasoning, some soy sauce. We're just gonna season this pot really, really good. And I have some adobo seasoning, and the one that I use here is the one with bitter lemon, but if you don't have that, feel free to use lemon or lime. And as you can see here, I'm actually adding some more lemon because I just feel like that lemon brightens up this soup. And there you see I added my chicken stock to my vegetables, and then I also added some water. And I'm just gonna scrape the bottom of that pan as I'm stirring all the vegetables to make sure I get all that goodness. So you see everything came to the top and all that flavors there. From there, I'm gonna add some parsley, some Italian seasoning, and I'm generous with these seasonings because you want a nice herby and earthy flavor. This is perfect for fall. So to the pot, I ended up adding 1/3 cup of rice, not very much rice at all because the main portion of the soup is not the rice, it's everything else. Once you put your rice in your soup, you wanna go ahead and let it cook for about 20 minutes because you want your rice to cook, but you don't want it to turn mushy. And like I said, I added a very minimal amount of chicken because that chicken is shredded, so it doesn't take much for the soup to have tons of chicken in it, even though that's not our main component of this soup. But we want to make sure that all those flavors are incorporated. And there you have it, friends. Delicious chicken, rice, and potato soup. So hearty, so delicious. Oh my gosh, you gotta try this one. So let's move on to dinner. So for dinner here, I have about 6 pieces of chicken, and that's my going rate with chicken if I'm just making it in the oven or on the stove for my family. If I'm keeping it whole, of course I need 6 pieces of chicken because there's 6 family members. Of course the chicken is cleaned. So here I'm just gonna add my seasonings to my chicken, and of course I'm gonna sit it in the refrigerator and let it marinate for a few hours. But if you only have an hour, that's fine. So to the chicken, I'm adding my complete seasoning, my onion powder, and then I'm gonna add some jerk seasoning. If you don't have the seasoning salt, it's fine, but I just love the flavor that it gives. Then of course some garlic powder, and my favorite adobo. And then I'm adding the Worcestershire sauce. I don't even know if I say that word correctly. You guys gotta tell me how you say it. But of course I'm gonna add some soy sauce. And then I had a little bit of browning sauce left over, and I just put some water to the bottom of it, and I needed to use it up, but we don't waste here, so I just added it to this recipe because it was appropriate for this. So here I'm just mixing up my chicken. Of course, my hands are always clean, and I want to just make sure that that marinade is all in that chicken. And from there, I end up putting the chicken in the Ziploc bag and placing it in the refrigerator. And I sat that for a couple of hours. Like I said, if you only have an hour, that's fine too. I pulled out my pan, and I'm just gonna go ahead and brown this chicken. It is on very, very high heat, and this is gonna go really fast. I don't think it took me more than 15 minutes to brown this chicken, and that included waiting on the pan to get hot. So once you feel that your chicken is to your liking, you want to go ahead and flip those pieces over. Now the pan is probably going to have some burn bits at the bottom, and that's fine because we're not going to use this oil for our chicken stew. Normally I would go ahead and be cautious about burning the drippings, but because we're not using these drippings to actually cook this chicken, it's fine for everything to be a little discolored at the bottom. So here I'm just removing my chicken because it got as brown as I needed it to get. And there I'm just gonna take my pan off. I'm gonna rinse it out. And this is my favorite green seasoning. If you guys have not checked out the recipe, I have a video on this recipe. It's actually one of my very first videos, and I find that this is so essential for so many recipes. So I just went ahead and added about 2 tablespoons of that to my pot. So there I added half the can of diced tomatoes that I used earlier in the weekend, and I think I had some tomatoes in the refrigerator that I added to this just to bulk it up some, and at the same time I needed to use my tomatoes. Even though I'm doing a challenge, I don't want to waste any food that's in my refrigerator that I need to use up, so I went ahead and added it here. Then I added my onions. So to my tomato and onion mixture, I'm going to be adding 2 packets of Sazon. These packets are not expensive at all. You can actually find them at Dollar Tree, and I believe about 6 packets come to a box, and the flavor and the color is just amazing. So from there, of course, I added some complete seasoning. I'm adding some chicken bouillon, and I'm just gonna stir that around to make sure everything gets nice and incorporated, nice and cooked through. We want our flavors to marry. And this deep red color is so pretty. Oh my God, it made the food so appetizing without even adding chicken. So to my pan, I'm gonna go ahead and add my chicken here. I wanna just go ahead and place the chicken skin side up, and we wanna get it nice and nestled and snuggled up in there. So from there, I'm gonna go ahead and add 3 cups of water, and then I'm gonna cover the pan. I'm gonna let it simmer, and this went ahead and cooked for about 35 minutes. So while that was cooking on its own, I went ahead and pulled out my pot for my rice, and here we have, of course, my bacon fat. If you do not have that bacon fat, feel free to use oil, but I find that this is so delicious in so many meals. And to this pot, I'm going to add that green marinade. I'm telling you, if you have not checked out my recipe on this marinade, you have to. It is a very frugal way of kicking up your recipes a notch. And the marinade lasts forever. I just pulled it out my freezer and let it sit. So to my pan, I'm adding some adobo seasoning. If you don't have that, you can use seasoning salt. Of course, I have my complete seasoning. And I'm just letting everything simmer together. I added some of this better than bouillon beef stock. I had it in the refrigerator. Now, the thing about these meals is if you do not have a certain item that I have, feel free to use what you have. So if you don't have beef bouillon, if you have any bouillon cubes, feel free to add it. If you don't, then don't add it. So to my pan, I went ahead and added some thyme leaves, and I also added some tomato. And here I'm going to add about half a cup of onions. And here I'm just adding some ketchup. I find that when you have a lot of savory flavors, that ketchup brings a sweetness that balances out the salty flavors. Now, if you don't have ketchup available and you have a little bit of sugar, you can feel free to add that. And if you don't want to add either one, then that's fine. And I'm just showing you here what all of that looks like mixed up and cooking together. So here I have some of the beans that I had made earlier in the week, and I'm just adding about 1/3 cup of those beans. And if you want to add more, you can add more. And after I added the beans, I went ahead and added the rice. Now here, this is 2 cups of rinsed rice. I do rinse my rice a couple of times before adding it to meals such as this. Very rarely do I not rinse my rice, not unless I'm in a rush. And I'm just gonna fry out my rice with all these delicious flavors just to make sure that the rice is getting nice and flavorful and slightly toasty. And at the same time, it's drying out some of the water from the rice being rinsed. And I'm just gonna stir that around for about 5 minutes, not too long. You don't want anything to burn, and you wanna make sure you're constantly stirring. So you're just going to continue to stir and make sure that those flavors are getting nice and incorporated and that your rice is getting nice and toasty. And then I'm going to go ahead and add my water here. And I added about 2 cups of rice, so therefore I added about 4 cups of water. And I'm just going to stir that around. And if you find that you've added too much water, then you can just go ahead and keep your pot uncovered and let the water evaporate. I like to go ahead and let my pot sit uncovered for a few minutes so that the water can evaporate, and at the same time the rice can go ahead and absorb some of that water without getting too mushy. From there, I'm going to go ahead and add a little bit of chicken bouillon. I found that I needed a little more salt, and we're just going to let the water evaporate out of the pot until you can see the rice at the very top of the water. Then you want to reduce your heat all the way down to its lowest setting. You want to go ahead and cover your pot and let that cook for about 25 minutes. And you don't have to go back and stir this because it's cooking on such a low heat. And then when I open my pot, this is what I have. I just want to give it a quick stir to make sure that everything's nice and cooked through. Make sure that everything's nice and combined. And as you can see, there's no mushy rice here. And of course, I had to take a bite to make sure everything was good to go. And there you have it, friends. There's my chicken that was nice and cooked after about 35 minutes, and our delicious rice in the pot. This was so much food. It was so much food. We still had rice left over. I'm going to end up using it for another meal that you'll see coming up in the series. So there you have it, friends. Our fourth full day of meals. These meals were so delicious. My family really enjoyed these meals, and it's always amazing to see what you can create out of what you have. So thank you again, friends, for coming to my channel. Be sure to like, comment, share, and subscribe so that you won't miss any of my videos that I have coming out. And until the next video, friends, bye.